Welcome, people. If you're watching a replay, this starts in 2 minutes if you want to skip ahead. You are here with the uber serious Steve and Nia, coming from you from our houses, I imagine. Nia, are you in your house?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't let everyone in. Oops. Here they come. The children are jumping in. Who let the dogs in?
Uber serious.
Uber serious. We are uber
Yes.
serious. This is how you know we've been on screens for too long.
Yes.
It's only day 2. Imagine what's going to happen on day 6.
Well, after the global conference, I don't have to imagine. I know what happens on day 6.
I hope you haven't seen the pictures. No, I don't. There's no pictures. It's okay. I'm not allowed evidence.
Hello, everybody who's already here. You're welcome to share on your videos that we can have a look at you and get to sense you a little bit better.
And also, if you want, type in your locations. I know I sound like a broken record, but that's really important to us here. Like, I think we've got a super global audience. When we look at people who are on this, there's people all throughout Europe, African nations, Asian, Pacific, obviously South America, North America. I don't think we have any penguins from Antarctica yet, but we'll have to check. Otherwise, we'd have all the continents covered.
Yet.
I have plans to recruit some penguins. Here we were being serious for a sec. Sydney's like, I better start the session actually. But I think Sydney is like 4 a.m. So that's a good effort, Lydia. All right, let's do this.
Nice to see you.
So welcome back, everyone, for another session. So this is at a lovely time slot here in the UK, prime time with Nia. Is coming to us from Israel. So this session is Why Am I Always Sick? Trauma and Persistent Health Issues. So you may have seen Nia at this time yesterday doing a great panel on intergenerational trauma. So if you haven't seen him, I'll read a little bio. So Nia was born to a family created by 2 Holocaust survivors. He went through cancer and chemotherapy age 22 and went on to teach intergenerational trauma and family constellations to other therapists in Israel. He's uber clever and kind, and he teaches embodied shadow work at EFC Russia. So just before we start, if you're here, that means you have one of these life pass things. So please turn your cameras on if at all possible. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you're not like in a bathtub or in a shower or something like that. It'd be really helpful for Nia to see the feedback and what everyone's doing, even if you're like eating or something like that. You're allowed to like be eating popcorn like a slob. It also means that if you've got the live pass, you've got access to unlimited sessions and the Q&As twice daily. So if anyone's watching the replay and wants that, you can get that. It's only $19. So also share this with anyone who would be interested. Don't share it next week. It'll be too late. Think of someone specific in your life who would benefit, or share it on social media. Anything's fine, but we want as many people to benefit as possible, particularly now. We're still at the start of the week. There's plenty of live sessions left. And if you'd like to learn more about like some of the courses we offer after this, I'll drop a link there and you can just go and have a little look-see. Pretty good stuff, whether it's about healing or whether it's about post-traumatic growth and developing your superpowers. So just before we start, a few safety things. Hope no one here has like binge watched every session today. If you have, I highly advise you just take time for self-care and just checking if you're actually resourced at the moment. Are you feeling up to this session? Sometimes things can come up. And if they do, if you feel spaced out or agitated or tense, get up and move, grab a drink of water or a piece of cheese or something, pat your dog, talk to cool people, go for a walk in nature. Just to resource yourself. That's during this session or after the session if anything's coming up. And also just ask, are you better served by one-to-one therapy? Nia is a therapist and he sees lots of people. There's no judgment there. So this is education and not therapy. So no big issues sort of dealing with them now, and it's okay if that's the case. We recommend that. Mainly, I think this session will just be useful, educational, and you'll hopefully get something out of it. So I'll hand over to Nia.
Thank you, Steve. You're a lovely broken record. So, hello, everybody. Welcome. Glad to see you here. I'm Nia, and I will be the teacher of this short lesson, 30 minutes, about the connection between trauma and recurrent health issues. And so where do we start? There are different ways or aspects to look at this issue. Some of them are very biological, like, well, naturally, if you have trauma and you treat it all the time and you're hyper alert and you're stressed out, so your immune system doesn't get the resources it needs, it functions less well, and you get to be more sick or get to have a greater chance to develop all kinds of cancers and stuff. So this would be around cortisol and all that. I'm not an expert on that, okay? But there is that aspect, the very physical one. A somewhat more energetic one would say that whenever we have a trauma, something splits in our body-mind, or body-mind consciousness, whatever. And something gets stiff in our body. Trying to fend off a trauma or trying to get some sense of control over what is happening and what feels like keeps happening inside me while the trauma is still alive. And when some place in my body is stiff, it is more likely to get injured repeatedly. It is also more likely to develop all kinds of infections and things with GTs at the end of their medical definitions. And we have that as well. Sometimes we get more sick because we're just so tense all the time that we just create recurring headaches because like this internally. So maybe it doesn't look that way, it just look that way instead of this way. But my nervous system keeps telling my entire body, tense up, be ready, be on the alert, be watchful, notice what is happening. And over time, I forget the option of not being clenched and stressed physically and suffering from different stuff. Sometimes the trauma is more complex. There's all this issue of complex PTSD, and sometimes it's intergenerational. So we actually carry both the trauma and the symptoms of the trauma from our ancestors. But having said all that, I want to lead us today to a certain part of trauma and sickness or symptoms. The one that has to do with symptoms as being connected to the specific trauma that we've suffered. So we can say in general, the trauma causes us to be less healthy. Okay, that makes sense. For some people, I actually met people who, as a result of trauma, decided they will never be sick again. And they're actually not sick for 50 years. So that's also possible, okay? As we say in this conference, trauma sometimes gives superpowers, right? However, I think that for most of us, when we go through a trauma, and it can be like a really big life-changing trauma, it can be smaller, small t trauma, unpleasant, but not life-endangering. We can say that the trauma itself gets stuck in the body, or that our response to the trauma gets stuck in our body. And I'll go through a few examples to make it more concrete. When I was 27, I started learning my master's degree in science education, doesn't matter here. and I went to an jiu-jitsu class, which felt great because finally I could fight. It also felt really flooding emotionally. I would get out of every lesson with bloodshot eyes, completely shaking, but still feeling like, yeah, I'm fighting through this. I'm me, a small kid who never was very strong physically. I'm actually allowing myself to bring all my physicality in. That was great. After 1 year of really enjoying myself, I got injured. I had a 90 kilograms guy pinning me to the ground like that. I was flooded with adrenaline. So I just tried to push him up with my hands like that. My elbows got seriously inflamed. I was in pain for months. And then some more months with less pain, but still coming and going, coming and going. At the time, I was already learning to become a body-mind therapist. So I started to pay attention to what is happening, why nothing works. Medication didn't work, or not for long. Different therapies I tried didn't work. What I did notice that when I was working with people, with clients, and I was applying lots of pressure, physical pressure, it was more painful. Okay, makes sense, right? But I also noticed that when the issue we were working with was about violence, even if I didn't apply much pressure, it would still hurt. But I didn't know what was the connection. So some years passed with sometimes no pain at all, sometimes some pain, sometimes peaks of pain. Then my wife and myself went to India for a honeymoon. And we were going to some internet cafe, and for no apparent reason, the owner started to shout at us. So we just split, went away. But while we went away, I was noticing that my elbows are really painful, and I haven't done anything physical with them. However, I felt like the internet cafe owner was really on the verge of violence towards us. Like, okay, violence again. But it's my honeymoon, it will wait. So it waited. And we got back to Israel. And a few months afterwards, I woke up one day feeling the pain. Like, okay, Nir, you have to do the work. You have to do what you preach, you know? There is something going on in your elbows. Come on, get in touch with that. I mean, the elbow here was painful. So I lie down on the carpet in my saloon, and I started breathing into my elbows and being physically in touch with my elbows. And the first thing that came to me was a scene from my childhood. I was probably 14, and there was this guy who for more or less a year bullied me. Now, it wasn't horrible bullying. He didn't beat the hell out of me. He would ridicule me, he would hit me, he would usually do it with friends. And the situation that came up for me was one break when he and two other friends were doing that. And I really wanted to hit back. I really wanted to hit him back. But I was too afraid. Because I knew that if I would do that, all three of them would beat the hell out of me. And I could feel my hands. I could feel myself holding myself like that. So I breathed some more and agreed to relax this tension and to let something come up. Guess what happened? I dissociated. So I got back to my body and dissociated again. And the third or fourth time something strange happened. I could suddenly feel the humiliation I could suddenly feel in my body how humiliating it was to stand there as a child, as an adolescent, not able to fight back, feeling ashamed. Something like 15 years after it happened, I finally could allow myself, I finally felt safe enough to be in touch with that. Then I felt the heat wave going through my body. And then the pain reduced by 50%, just like that. 10-minute session. After years of therapy and physical therapy and putting creams and trying medications and doing emotional work, because I was holding this trauma, not a huge trauma, but still an unpleasant one. And I was also holding my response. And many of our inflammations and many of our pain, physical pains, and physical situations have this kind of internal logic. Something happened. We couldn't deal with that, fair enough. It must have been difficult. We dissociate something in us. I call it the dissociation tissue. We create a dissociation tissue in us. The result being different symptoms. I see it in my work very often. I'll move from myself now to another common example. Lots of women have, it's called in English, uterine pathways inflammations after having sex. Usually not after having any sex. It's after having sex, which doesn't feel safe enough, which doesn't feel like it was fully, completely, 100% intentional on their side. And very often when we go back in time, we see that there was some sort of sexual abuse. And we can see that when you work with the abuse, and when it can be digested in the body, then something doesn't have to stop immediately and clench and not allow any movement in the pelvis. And I gave the examples of inflammations, but it can be vaginismus, and it can be different pains of the floor of the pelvis, and it can be back pain. Essentially, every time that we block the trauma in our body because it was too much, it's a verb. We have to keep blocking it all the time, unconsciously. We have to maintain this dissociation layer. But our body isn't built to stay with dissociations for long. And when we do it for long, there are always symptoms. Sometimes they are very physical or very clear. Sometimes they are very sneaky. Like, back pain can have so many reasons. I once knew a person who had a debilitating back pain every time that his partner was being called to him. Now, he lost a parent when he was a child. That's a big trauma. But every time he was again in the danger of being abandoned, something would just try to break in him. And then he would hold the brake so he wouldn't break. But it felt like his back was about to break, and it was very painful. I often see it with children to narcissistic parents. That every time they meet with their parents, or even talk on the phone with them, some symptoms come up. So like nothing happened. I was just talking with my mom, and again she was talking on herself and not seeing me. and 5 hours later I have a migraine. And it can take years to identify the correlation, because it's not always visible. And for many people, we don't know that the parent is narcissistic until a certain stage of development. Like, yeah, they're just my parents. And it's a part of the thing about trauma in general. Very often, we don't realize that it's a trauma. It was just not ideal or difficult. Or maybe it was really difficult, but we just got through that. In the Israeli army, there is this concept of combat legacy. It's when they teach you about a certain combat in order that you learn from the experience of the people who were there. The thing is, they never talk about their emotions. They never talk about how frightening it was. They never talk about their life danger, about the friends they lost. It's all about how they manage to survive in difficult situations and win the situation. And I think that most of us in our family have this kind of combat legacy. It's like, grandfather went through the Second World War. It was really difficult. He lost lots of friends, but he got home back safely. He met grandma, and everything is fine. We're just fucked up, and we don't know why. It's not clear sometimes, okay? Until we start to look at it, then it becomes clear. So, what would you like to know more? Let's have some questions. Maybe there are some questions for whether let me have a look. Yes, would you like to ask any questions about this topic? You can write in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer. Do you think that the part of the body where the pain is located is meaningful always? Well, it's a very common assumption in alternative therapy that the location of the pain or location of the symptoms is meaningful. I would say that it is usually meaningful, but the meaning may change. For example, it may be possible that I'm having very clenched jaws and pain in this area, and because I'm biting the words I can't say. But it's possible that I have the same symptoms exactly because I was sexually abused from behind, and I always keep my anus closed like this, and then it goes all the way up the digestion system, and I close this as well. So there is meaning to the place, but I wouldn't infer what happened or what was the trauma just from where the pain is, where the symptom is. Sometimes the symptoms appear at the place where they can't, where the energy can't move anymore. It gets stuck. Okay, maybe for another person with the same experience like myself, it would get stuck in the shoulders or in the wrists. For me, it was here. More questions. How to use somatic exercises to help reduce your window of tolerance? It's kind of too big of a question, but I would say in a very general way that I always try to touch the flooding or the sense that it's overwhelming from a safe position and in a very small doses. It works much better than trying to jump in a trauma and trying to go out of the other side of it. Could you speak to ways trauma impacts executive functioning? Well, again, another big question. There is no just one way. Some people would take a trauma and they would become amazing leaders that move forward and inspire people and they never stop, and they never fail, and they take care of everybody, and maybe they're suffering, but they don't show it, and you know, and some people would just be unable to hold any form of structure, and it would be a completely different story. So how would you break it down to a process for dealing with pain of a specific body part? I usually match people with what feels right for them, but again, in a very general way, it's always about getting back in touch with the dissociation. So not trying to break through the dissociation or to cancel it, but there is some trauma here, and I did something to stop it from reaching the rest of my life. Okay, so I can't just go over the dissociation and pour the water into that cup and hope for good, it will just get messy. But I can gently touch the dissociation, very, very gently, very slowly. Allow my presence in my body to slowly, very slowly get touched. And digest what I can very gently. And then allow the movement in the body. I hope it makes sense, and if not, walk with a person who can lead you. Can you differentiate between pain caused by trauma versus chronic pain illnesses that can be triggered by trauma, but that leave the sympathetic nervous system in a constant state of flight? I have the experience of being able to differentiate with certain clients. It has a somewhat different sense in my body when I'm in their presence. But I'm not sure I have a model I can offer you. But just know it's possible. Differentiate if you start paying attention, not just to the symptom itself, but to how it feels the symptoms is created or aggravated in your body. With fibromyalgia and trauma, you can sometimes sense a difference, because in fibromyalgia it feels like something here in the back of the head is always clenched, is always on the alert, and it's very similar to PTSD, this sense, but it's not identical. If you try to pay attention to both versions, maybe you sense it. I have not been sick for many years, I'm glad to hear, but I have a lot of trauma, I have a lot of pain and other things that bother me, but I never get cold or anything like that. Any thoughts on that? But like I mentioned before, I know someone who decided at age 18 she will never make herself sick. She was not sick, but she had lots of pains. There are no free meals, my friends. If I manage to use my superpowers to avoid one group of symptoms, chances are another group of symptoms will come up. So maybe I won't suffer physically so much, but I will suffer mentally or emotionally very much. Maybe I will not suffer from pain, but I will suffer from weakness. Maybe I'll not suffer from being sick a lot, but I will suffer from some autoimmune condition, etc. I don't think there is like fully escaping that. However, it can take different forms because we're different people with different history, different DNA, different embodiment, and different superpowers. I get diarrhea before public performances. How can I know if it is just distress or an underlying trauma? I can't know that for you, just from here on the screen. And I would generally say that if it gets better over time, it's more likely a sign of stress and you just get more acclimated. However, if it's a result of trauma and you're not dealing with the trauma, chances are you will keep having the same symptoms without much change, or maybe with an increase of the symptom. But it's like a very general sign. I wouldn't rely on that to know if it's trauma or just stress. And I would just explore it. I would just explore how it feels standing in front of an audience, and what it brings in me and what it reminds me, and see where that goes. Steve, I see you start to move. It means our time is up, right?
Unfortunately, it does. We just
just one word before that.
Great.
If you have any more questions, feel free to write me. My email is near.esterman@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook or through my website, nearesterman.com. And so if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for being here today. And back to you, Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, we also have the Q&A sessions at 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. UK, which is 7 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern time each day. We've got Roger Mills, who's a PTSD specialist, EMDR therapist, and we've also got Patricia, who's got a background in constellations or family-ish work, which is similar to Nia's background as well. So you can come to the Q&A sessions if you're here live as well. And thank you, Nia. There's so much there and so many more questions that you can answer. And obviously, you've got so much knowledge in this area. So Nia actually may be back tomorrow as well, but I'll let you know about that in a second.
Yes, I will be back.
Yeah, so
1 p.m. UK time.
1 p.m. UK time. So I'll bring up the schedule in a second too about that. If there is anything you want to write in the chat that you learned from this session as well from Nia, please do so, or you can write it down in your own space if there's something kind of private but you want to remember it. So I want you to get stuff out of this session. And as well, of course, please do share this with people who are going to benefit. I keep saying it. I know Nia says I sound like a broken record, but that's what we want. We want people to actually learn some stuff from this event. That's why we put it on. There's 87 sessions. It's mad. It took ages to put together. I don't think I've slept for 18 weeks. But so yeah, please do share it with everyone. Make it worth it. And we've also got a course if like you're really interested in this stuff and you actually like the stuff that we're doing. You can also check out the course Trauma Healing with Ilan using a shaking method, and then there's ones about post-traumatic growth, not from just healing, but also growing from the trauma and learning some superpowers that are associated with that particular trauma. So yeah, do check out those things. Replays there, that's the link. Please don't share it publicly. That's for your access people. And it keeps getting updated. I'm updating the website each time as we go, so they'll keep going. And if you have need any help, Agatha's email is there as well. Okay, so yeah, share it. Please share it. It's good stuff. And now I'm going to share as well, share the schedule with you. So here we go, just so you can see what else is coming up. Even my computer buttons are tired. So that was Nia's session. That one's not coming up anymore. But next we have Dead Dana. She's got some great stuff around polyvagal theory. It makes it really understandable rather than like some crazy sort of theoretical thing that sometimes is really hard to understand. So that's worth checking out along with Patricia's session. A whole heap more, as I mentioned as well. Tomorrow, around the middle of the day, we've got a panel on trauma and sexual violence. You're Not Broken, and Nia's actually going to join that with us as well. So there's going to be Ilan, there's going to be Paul, Nia will be there, Daniela will be in charge, making sure it's all held together. Obviously, there's a lot more coming up as well. Things around boundaries, things, if there's any men in the house, not many in this field often attending events, but that one's around masculine trauma. That's a really good session as well. Daniela's doing one about burnout. That might be useful to attend. So yeah, a lot of good stuff coming up. So please do join us there. Join the Q&A sessions if you have questions as well. And thank you a ton, everyone. Thank you, Nia. Anything, final closing thing before I kick everyone out?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the conference. You're welcome to be in touch. Thank you.
Cheers, Nia. Cheers, everyone. And rest well. It's almost 10 p.m. where you are, so have a good one.
It is.